Good afternoon. The Memphis and Shelby County Board of Adjustment is hereby called to order for its regularly scheduled meeting of November 15, 2023. My name is Tim Rainey. I'm chairman of the board. Mr. Brett Ragsdale serves as secretary of the board. Mr. Ragsdale, may I get a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Ms. Baker?
Here.
Ms. Bostic?
Here.
Mr. Bruce?
Present.
Mr. Campbell?
Present.
Mr. Claybrook?
Here.
Chair Rainey?
Here.
We have a quorum.
The Memphis and Shelby County Board of Adjustment is the oldest appointed governmental body in Memphis and Shelby County. We were established in 1925. The board hears appeals from the administration of the zoning ordinance, requests for variances from the zoning ordinance, and other requests as articulated by local zoning laws adopted pursuant to the enabling legislation. The 8 members of the board are appointed, 4 by the mayor of Memphis and 4 by the mayor of Shelby County, with confirmation by the Memphis City Council or the Shelby County Board of Commissioners. We serve without remuneration. At this time, I'd like to swear in the staff. You may remain seated, but do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right, thank you. May I get a motion to approve the minutes from last month's meeting?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Mr. Secretary, please provide us a secretary's report if we have one this month, and then explain the procedure for today's meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a secretary's report, but I do want to acknowledge one of our planners who has been with us about three months shorter than I have, which is almost 5 years. His name happens to be Brett as well. He is actually moving on to New York City to work for, the Economic Development Corporation. So on the waterfront in New York as a project manager. And so today is actually his last day. So his swan song will be presentations to BOA, and then he will go on and
go off into the sunset.
That's right. So we want to thank Brett for all the hard work and dedication to the city of Memphis, and he'll be missed. So
absolutely
wanted to recognize that. And with that, I will go into the procedure for the meeting. I will introduce each case as listed on the agenda. Copies of the agenda are found on the front right podium. For each case, the planner with the Division of Planning and Development will give a presentation that will contain site plans, photographs, and maps of the subject property. At the conclusion of the staff presentation, the applicant will present his or her case. After the applicant's presentation, the board will hear first from those speakers in support of the application, then from those speakers in opposition to the application, and then finally, the applicant will have an opportunity to provide rebuttal. All parties who wish to provide testimony to the board will be sworn in by the chair. If a member of the audience wishes to provide testimony in support of or in opposition to a particular case on today's agenda, he or she will need to fill out speaker's cards for the record. Speaker's cards are available at the front podium. Once filled out, speaker's cards can be submitted to any DPD planner at the left podium. We do not need speaker's cards from the applicant since their names are already part of the record. After all parties have been heard, the board will close the public hearing, make a motion, and then deliberate on the case. Pursuant to the board's rules of procedure, the time allotted for speakers will be as follows. The applicant has 5 minutes to present his or her case. The applicant may reserve any unused time for his or her rebuttal. Those speaking in support of the application will have 5 minutes. This 5 minutes is the total time allotted for support testimony regardless of the number of speakers. Those speaking in opposition to the application have 10 minutes. This 10 minutes is the total time allotted for opposition to testimony regardless of the number of speakers. The applicant has a 2-minute time for rebuttal in addition to any unused time from his or her presentation. These times do not include time for questions from and answers to members of the board. The chair may provide additional time provided both sides are given an equal amount of additional time. If the applicant or any speaker would like to be heard after the conclusion of the public hearing, or if a board member wishes to hear additional testimony from any party, a 2/3 vote is required to reopen the public hearing pursuant to the board's rules of procedure. Please note that once the public hearing is reopened, both the applicant and opposition will be allowed to provide additional testimony and/or rebuttal. All motions by this board will be made in the affirmative. The private acts governing the board require the affirmative vote of at least 5 members to approve an application, regardless of the number of board members present. The board may also vote to hold an application for a period not to exceed 90 days with the consent of the applicant, or 30 days without the consent of the applicant. All section numbers that we refer to come from the Memphis and Shelby County Unified Development Code, or the UDC, which was adopted by the Memphis and Shelby County Board of Commissioners in August of 2010 and became effective on January 1st of 2011. I will introduce the entire UDC and make it part of today's record, thus dispensing of the reading of individual sections. The board is vested with the power to act on these cases before us today under the provisions of Chapter 9.22 of the UDC. Mr. Chairman, I submit that all cases have been filed in proper order, all applicants have been notified of this hearing, and all notice requirements have been fulfilled as required by the UDC.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. At this point, the board will establish the consent agenda. To establish the consent agenda, the Secretary will call out each eligible case. If any member of the audience, staff, or board member objects to a case being placed on the consent agenda, he or she should make their objection known by a show of hands when the Secretary reads that case. Once the consent agenda is established, the board will vote on all cases placed on the agenda or the consent agenda as a whole and will not hold individual public hearings on those cases. Mr. Secretary, which items today are eligible to be placed on our consent agenda?
Item number 7, BOA 2023-0132, 4650 Laurel Oaks Drive as a 1-month hold. Item number 8, BOA 2023-033, 4727 Elvis Presley Boulevard, approval with conditions. Item number 9, BOA 2023-034, 5985 West Midgetown Road as approval with conditions, with one friendly amendment. We will strike condition number 2 in its entirety and replace it with the following. Applicant to provide a recordable easement with neighbor allowing ingress and egress to the subject site. Said easement shall be recorded with the Shelby County Register and shall run with the land to be binding on future owners, heirs, and assigns. Item number 10, BOA 2023-036, 70 Cherry Road. And that's the consent agenda.
Okay. Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as established by the Secretary, which are items 7 as a hold, 8 approval with conditions, 9 approval with the amended condition 2, and 10 approval with conditions.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. I want to remind you before we take the vote that by voting on the consent agenda, you are agreeing that you're affirming that you have read the staff report and are full agreement with the conditions. Mr. Secretary, may I get a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Ms. Savage Towns. Oh, sorry, let me go in. Ms. Bostic.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mr. Claybrook.
Yes.
Mr. Bruce.
Yes.
Ms. Baker.
Yes.
Vice Chair Savage Towns.
Find that the standards of the UDC of 9.22.6 are being met and will not be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
And Chair Wright.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, so if you're here for cases 7, 8, 9, and 10, you've either been held or approved as requested. Mr. Secretary, we call our first case or cases we're going to hear together.
Yes, sir. We're going to hear items number 1 and 2 together.
Perfect.
They are companion cases or similar cases. They're side by side and very similar. So, but we can vote on those separately.
Okay.
So that is item number 1, BOA 2023-0106, 1312 Faxon Avenue, and item number 2, BOA 2023-0107, 1314 Faxon Avenue.
Okay, perfect. I see the applicant here. Is there any opposition to today's case? Okay. Mr. Davis, you're up for the next to last time.
Brett Davis, Planning and Development. Was there opposition present?
No.
Did we have any conditions you wanted to discuss? Or
No, I think that the board wanted to hear it.
okay, gotcha,
I should have
Give us a brief summary and then go over y'all's conditions. That'd be great. Sorry.
sounds good. Okay. And I do want to say it's been a pleasure working with y'all and staffing this board the past few years. So thank y'all. These are 2 cases, like Mr. Axel was saying, that we're going to consider together. They're both adjacent parcels and both concern very similar variance requests related to sanctioning existing encroachments of principal structures and also legitimizing non-conforming accessory dwelling units These are two lots. They currently have a total of 8 dwelling units between the two of them. Each lot has a duplex in the front and then a 2-unit accessory dwelling structure in the back. Generally, duplexes or 2-family houses are entitled to no accessory dwelling units. So this request is to allow any accessory dwelling unit at all in the back, in addition to those encroachments I mentioned. And I'm going to show us some photos. The lot sizes here we see are 6,400 square feet and 8,400 square feet approximately. Both are zoned residential urban 1s or a duplex zoning district within the Speedway Terrace local landmarks district. All right, so the land use map shows that this is a mix of duplexes and single-family homes. There is a small public alley to the rear of the property. Here's that westernmost duplex and the easternmost duplex. I'll point out that both of these properties have parking pads currently in the front, as well as driveways from Faxon. Here they are together. The back sort of functions as a cohesive development, as almost a bungalow court. This is the western property's rear structure. It has 2 units in it. These are the 2 units' front doors, which are on the property line. So to get to these front doors, you have to go through the eastern property in the back. And here's the accessory structure of the eastern property. This is taller than the principal structure and very close in size, and also has 2 units. You can see a front door here and another front door there. There's also this little accessory structure on the eastern property as well. Taken together, you can see the 3 accessory structures from one vantage point here and another here. We do have surveys of the property. So again, we've got that front duplex, parking pad, shared driveway up the side, and then that rear accessory structure that has its front doors facing east onto the neighboring property. And the eastern property is a fairly similar story. So we have received a lot of opposition cards related to these structures. A lot of neighbors have concerns about how they've been kept up over the last several decades, with concerns that they haven't been kept up very well. What we are recommending is in recognition that there's a long history of accessory dwelling units here, and in recognition that this is a duplex dwelling zoning district, but also trying to require, force, so to speak, improvements. So what we're doing is recommending that each lot be permitted an accessory dwelling unit, but only one, and that accessory dwelling unit needs to be no greater than 700 square feet, which is the maximum size for accessory dwelling units in single-family detached zoning districts. So bringing them in closer into conformance with our general standards, and what that would do is require, basically redevelopment of both of those structures back there and ensure that work is being done. I also am pointing out that the current applicant is not the one who'd be doing this work. The applicant is hoping to sell these properties and was not made aware of these zoning issues when they bought the properties. To my understanding, no buyer is currently in place. I'm just pointing out that, like all variances, unless otherwise conditioned, this expires in 2 years. And with the site plan changes we're requiring, as well as the changes to the roof structures, we would need to finalize the site plan, and the improvements would actually need to be completed within 2 years, or these variances would expire, which might not be the most likely, and I just wanted to point that out. So again, we're weighing the compatibility of this density with the neighborhood character, as well as the longstanding existence of accessory structures back here, and bringing the total number of units down to 6. We have, like I mentioned, 10 recommended conditions that would require several site improvements as well. So in addition to the size changes, we would require canopy trees to be planted, repairing curbing and sidewalk as needed, the removal of both parking pads, the removal of that shed that's very close to the eastern front duplex in the back, a site plan that confirms that sufficient parking is being provided, taking into account the site-specific conditions, the alley and the driveways, et cetera, and clarifying that no additional encroachment is to be permitted through this variance. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to discuss these conditions in a little more detail, and I'm available for any other questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Davis. Are there any questions for staff?
Yes, I have some questions. I asked to pull this off the agenda because I did see all the letters, and I know this neighborhood is working really hard to try to get back on their feet, and this property has been mismanaged and poorly managed over a number of years. And so my question to you is, you are calling this non-conforming, and you're basing that on the fact that you, I think you got some information from the assessor's office maybe that they had been there for a number of years, but when you saw that, could you really tell whether there were two dwelling units in each of the back houses, or even that any? You just could see the buildings were there, right? You couldn't really tell what was in there. Is that true, or am I wrong about that?
They are classified, to the best of my memory, as dwelling units on the assessor's website. They are classified as living quarters.
Classified, but I have a feeling that no one really knows what was there many years ago. But so, okay. Well, I get your answer about that. But I'm hesitant to vote for this, and I'll tell you why. Because with the poor management over time, and you say he's going to sell it, why not just let the code enforcement that should be done here, let it go forward? And then, he has to sell the property in the condition that it's in, and whoever buys it has to bring it up to code. I don't see any reason for us to intervene here and to approve any kind of variance. So that's why I pulled it off, and why I'm not inclined to vote for it. I don't see any people out in the audience, but sometimes it can be hard for people to get here, in the middle of the day. And they did send the letters in, and I think they were all heartfelt. And so I'm not inclined to vote for this, and I would just rather not approve a variance for it, and this applicant can get the property fixed up or sell it or whatever he do. So I'm open for anyone else.
Other questions of staff? I do have one quick question. Before, in your conclusions, you talked about the 2-year timeline, but I don't see 2 years listed in the conditions.
The 2-year expiration date for variances is actually not found in the UDC. It's found in the board's rules of procedure.
Okay.
And is included in all of our notices of disposition. So that's the standard expiration date, unless otherwise conditioned.
Makes sense. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Any other questions of staff? All right, Mr. McCaskill, you want to give your name and address for the record for us?
Tim McCaskill, 6800 Poplar Avenue with the Reeves Firm.
Okay, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
The current owner of this property purchased it 2 years ago. She's from California. She purchased it sight unseen. That should be a lesson in itself. But her local broker didn't inform her about the extent of the work that was needed to be done on the houses. And she doesn't have the money to put into it or the desire, and she wants to sell it to somebody that will. Her attorney suggested that she get a zoning letter before she sells it. And that's really what got us here. The zoning letter said that a non-permitted use such that a duplex as a principal structure is allowed, but we can find no such time where an accessory structure has been allowed in either an ADU or higher density second duplex on the property. But it says we can find no such time where has been allowed. But we did some research on these buildings, and all four buildings were constructed between 1930 and 1947. Two of them in 1947, one in 1930, one in 1940. At that time, the zoning code was the 1922 zoning code, and this was considered A zoning, residential. And what's allowed in A zoning is one-family dwellings, two-family dwellings, churches, schools, libraries. And then the next section is on accessory buildings. It says uses. This is 1922. It's hard to read. Uses customarily incident to any of the above uses when located on the same lot and not involving the conduct of a business. So that basically says you can have an accessory building, and it doesn't say that you can't have a duplex. All these were built under this code, and I guess I've got as much of a question as I do a point, is that if they were built under that code and they were allowed by right, do we have the right to deny that? And I guess you can ask Mr. Ragsdale his opinion on this.
Yeah, as it currently exists, and I apologize, and I would love to see your information, but no, as it currently exists, it's not allowed.
Even though it was allowed when it was constructed?
Correct. I think that these were like added after the fact. The ADUs in the rear.
Yeah, according to the assessor's office, one was built in 1940, one was built in 1947.
Right, the structures were,
Yes.
but were they ADUs?
It doesn't say. It says
Correct, yeah.
It says residential. So they would have to be ADUs.
The history of the structures is fairly opaque. We've done research into the Sanborn fire insurance maps. There have been accessory structures here for decades. I know that one of the accessory structures on the assessor's website is listed as a construction date in the 1970s. They were not both built in the 40s and might have been expanded without permits at some point. It's not totally clear, but we have made the determination that they could not be inhabited currently without getting a variance, especially since they're currently uninhabited and can lose that. There's the question of legal nonconforming structures, but also the question of legal nonconforming uses. The legal nonconformity of a use expires when it goes unused for more than 1 year.
Well, these haven't been. The current owner is putting everybody on a month to month. So when she does sell it, the new owner can immediately go in and start improving the structures without having to have people there. But they've all been occupied this year. But I guess we're not getting an answer on this.
I think Mr. Davis answered that. We've determined that they are not compliant, they're not legal. And I don't know if you provided that information, but that we have done extensive research on this, and as Mr. Davis said, gone through the Sanborn maps and the previous zoning. And I think that was provided in the zoning letter. Is that correct? So the answer is that you do need the variance for this.
For
For the
the two rear units. Yeah. That, that is, all I've got for right now. I'd like to save the rest of the time for rebuttal.
Okay. I don't know that we have any opposition.
Oh, really?
No, when they showed up
rebuttal
last,
then.
they showed up last week. I do have a couple questions for you though. So one of my questions, so they are occupied.
Yes.
And were you okay with the conditions the staff already put on it? To just have the one 700 square foot accessory unit in the back of each one? Which I guess would mean having to tear some stuff down because there's a lot more than 700 square feet back there.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Just to clarify, these units did not appear occupied to me when I did my site visit. That might have changed, but it's been a few months.
Okay.
Well, and I may note as well, these are not just single units, structures, so that's another issue that, we have with these. So even if you approve the ADUs, they're not single ADUs, they are multiple units.
Right.
We don't know how many, but there are multiple units.
Yeah. Are all the units we think now filled or just some of them?
Filled,
Do they have tenants?
6 have tenants right now.
Okay.
2 just moved out.
2 just moved out. Okay. All right. Any other questions before we get any rebuttal?
Okay.
Would you like to rebut?
Rebut myself?
All right. Thank you, Mr. McCaskill. Any other, so I think what we need to do is talk about this. So if we could get a motion to approve BOA 2023-106 and 107 as conditioned by staff.
So moved.
Seconded. Any thoughts?
Lot in this property.
It's a lot, yeah.
It's a lot. Trying to go back to it. So the conditions, they would have to remove, I'm sorry, I was going back over them. Anything greater than 700 square foot.
Right.
Okay.
One of those is the bigger one, not counting the upstairs, looks like it's about 1,000 square feet on the bottom.
Wow, okay.
The smaller one would be close to the same. 37. Yeah, 1,100 square feet.
Oh, okay,
So both major renovations on those.
okay. Then we're removing the parking pads from the front.
I have a question for staff, whoever wants to answer it. Say if we approved a variance on this today and it was according to your conditions and they had to tear parts of it down, all that to conform, how long would they have to do that?
So the building permits, assuming that it was work that would require a permit, would need to be issued within 2 years of today's approval.
Okay. Well, I just say again, that's one of the reasons why I don't want to approve this, because it just kicks the can down the road, in my view, another 2 years, and I doubt if the management is going to change. And so anyway, thank you.
What if it was 1 year? I'm just curious. I bet you would approve, you'd approve 1 month. I know you wouldn't do 2 years. I'm trying to see where your line is.
I don't see any reason to approve something that isn't permitted, and they're saying it's not.
I'll be honest, I was hoping that it was not occupied,
Yeah.
and I was going to add the condition that there would be no occupation during that time. Because it's not the best time for buying and selling. Or I guess it might be okay for buying if you have cash. Not the best time for selling right now, which could make it take a little longer than normal to get something like that sold. But I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, board members, of course, everybody's going to look at it a little differently. But, and I do feel bad about people living there and everything and having to move out. But my guess is that would be the case anyway, to conform with these conditions. And you saw the photographs, they're in terrible condition and have been for years, and it would continue. I'm afraid if this variance gets approved. So,
if this gets approved and it gets sold, does that condition move? That stays with the property, not the owner, right?
Correct.
So the next owner will, in essence, get.
I tell you what,
Yeah.
I don't want to cut you off,
No.
but I tell you what maybe could happen. The owner sells it in the condition it is in, and the new owner comes in and requests a variance, and they've got a real plan that, shows what they're going to do. And, cut it down to one unit in the back or whatever, even though I will say that I think I heard right that no one really knows. They know when the structures were built back there, but they don't know when they became ADUs. And so we're only just guessing by calling it non-conforming, because it might just be illegal. We don't know. I think that's the case. I could be wrong.
I think I would like to suggest an additional condition for the board to think about, and that would be that, I gotta think of how to say it. Basically, I want nobody living in those ADUs until they're changed to the 700 square feet. So we only have the 2 duplexes occupied. And because I know as dealing with investors, how going into it not knowing what you need on a variance or something like this just takes your ability to find somebody that wants to buy it. And it's just a tough market. So I think I would like condition 10 to be, there shall be no occupation of the accessory dwelling units until conditions 1 through 10 have been complied with.
So that'd be condition 11.
11, yes.
So does that, in essence, remove any current tenant or
From the backs.
from the backside?
They would have to get rid of them, and they can,
When would they have to get rid of them?
That's what I was thinking.
Well, they're on month to month.
When does leases end? Is it month to month?
sir.
Okay, so it is month to month. There's no long, okay.
month. So I think it would be immediate. I'm not giving them a time limit to do it. They just have to do it. Would that be correct? We don't need to put a time limit on it because they just have to do that.
Correct.
As opposed to having 2 years to do that, they would need to do that. I think because we're saying until such time as those ADUs are done, that they have to do that.
Yeah, and we can follow up on that.
Okay.
Oh, you mean they'd have to just tell them tomorrow that they have to move out? I mean,
Well, I mean, they'd have to do it under their lease, which is if it's a month to month, that's a 30 days. So it might be 45. You typically have to tell them 30 days prior to that 30-day term. At least we have it in writing. They're where they are now.
yeah.
Any other comments? All right, if you'll give us a roll call vote, please, and with that friendly amendment added, correct? Okay. All right, go ahead, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Claybrook,
Yes.
Mr. Bruce,
Yes.
Ms. Baker,
No.
Ms. Bostic,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Vice Chair Savage Towns.
No, I find that the standards of the UDC of 9.22.6 will not be met and will be duly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
Chair Rankin.
Yes.
5 yes, 2 no, motion carries.
All right, approved as conditioned. Next case, please.
And number 2, can we vote, get a second, or a motion and a second, and then
And a
vote on it
second,
as well.
got
The same.
Oh, we need to do-
case, unless
yeah,
you wanna
yeah.
have discussion about that.
I thought I listed both of them at the same time in the first one, but we can do that. So that was BOA, we need a motion to approve BOA 2023-107 with the same conditions as 106.
Correct.
Move to
as
approve.
amended.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Okay, if you'll give us a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Claybrook?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Baker?
No.
Ms. Bostic?
Yes.
Mr. Bruce?
Yes.
Vice Chair Savage Towns?
No, I find that the standards of the UDC of 9.22.6 are not being met. It would be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
And Chair Rainey?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you much. Now, if we can call the next case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item number 3, BOA 2023-011, 4139 Parkchester Avenue.
All right, see the applicant here. Is there any opposition? Hearing none. Good. Myers, will you give us a staff report, please?
Which one is this?
Hi, River Myers with Division of Planning and Development. This is BO case 2023-011. This is a variance request to allow a second driveway at a single-family residence. This is a retroactive permit that was filed as a result from a code enforcement complaint for work done without a permit. The applicant is Carlos Mendez, being represented by David Bray of the Bray Davis firm. And we also have DPD's Magali Ramirez here to translate for Mr. Mendez as needed. The property is located at 4139 Parkchester Avenue. This is approximately 0.194 acres, located in a residential single-family 6 zone. The property is just south of the I-240 loop, just east of Lamar and Getwell, and 1 street south of Knight Arnold in Parkway Village area. The vicinity map here shows it is right there at the intersection of Parkchester Avenue and Claudette Road. This is the zoning atlas showing it is in the R6 zone, as mentioned, with CMU 1 and 3 to the west, RU 3 to the southwest and southeast there. The land use is single-family housing surrounded by single-family housing, with multifamily housing and office use to the west and institutional to the east, which is Sheffield High School. The property is part of the Knight Woods subdivision built in 1965, recorded in Plat Book, page 30, page 57. This is an aerial of the subject property highlighted here in yellow. This is before the driveway addition. As I previously mentioned, Mr. Mendez is here, was issued a citation for the work completed without a permit. So as such, we have enforcement photos from that enforcement case taken by our inspectors. The ones that I have here are from March and June of this year. But there are also ones as early as last week that show that this is the same condition of the site. The original driveway is the one here on the left that terminates in the carport. The new driveway on this side of the house is the one that Mr. Mendez is seeking to retain. The new driveway goes along the side of the house and terminates into the backyard. Which you can see here, and it has a parking pad there in the rear. The original driveway that has the carport is the overall characteristic of the neighborhood, with driveways that end in the carport attached to the house. From what I saw, there are no other driveways in the area that have any kind of extension that goes into the backyard. The only non-standard driveways I saw were either circular driveways, which are allowed by code. The additional new driveway goes alongside of the house, which has a MLGW meter, which you can see here. There is, yes, here in this one. You can see that there's a space around the meter, but there is a easement that goes along that. And we'll see here in a moment on the survey, there is also a 7.5-foot sewer drain easement there as well. Related to this, the curb cut, sorry, so not for the, here we go. Has a drain on the street there that has, the driveway has to jut over in order to avoid. And so with the MLGW gas line there, I've actually spoken with MLGW representatives about this. Mr. Thomas Casey was the builder-developer liaison with MLGW, and he said that the driveway over the gas meter is not a direct violation, but it is also not recommended by them. But he told me that Mr. Mendez has already filed for a work order to have that gas service moved to the front corner of the house. And as I said, here's the rear parking pad in the backyard that the driveway connects to now. And here is our updated aerial that shows the addition. It kind of goes under that tree there, but it aligns directly in front of Claudette Road at the intersection there of Parkchester and Claudette, where the original driveway is kind of off-center, directly just on Parkchester and not at that, in the middle of that intersection there. And here is our site plan and survey. This is showing the conditions as is right now. It also shows that 7.5-foot drain sewer easement as well. Sorry. So in conclusion, Mr. Mendez is seeking relief from the subsection 4.4.1b of the Unified Development Code in order to keep his already built driveway as well as the original driveway. Staff has concluded that in granting this variance, it will cause substantial detriment to the public good, will substantially impair the intent and purpose of the UDC, and it will be injurious to the neighborhood and general welfare, and is not in harmony with the purpose and intent of the UDC. Furthermore, we cannot find no hardship or practical difficulty that justifies the variance. Therefore, staff is recommending rejection. However, if approved, these are the conditions in which we would approve. Removal of the original driveway, so it is back in conformance with the UDC standards, and then the gas service relocated and or protective bollards around those gas meters, depending on where it is located. And then any change or deviation to be reviewed through administrative DPD. However, as a note, Mr. Mendez has informed me through emails that he is not in agreement with this, with the conditions. So he would like to discuss them if it is approved. So this concludes my staff report. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Very good. Thank you very much. Are there any questions for staff? All right. If the applicant will come forward. You'll give your name and address for the record, Mr. Bray.
David Bray with the Bray Firm, 2950 Stage Pleasant North.
Juan Mendez, 4139 Parkchester.
Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so, and I'm going to let Mr. Mendez speak as much as possible to this. This has been a tough one from the start. Mr. Mendez had a problem. He couldn't get access to his backyard with the existing driveway. You look at the existing survey, the driveway dead end into the carport. There was no access, no room to get around that end. He saw a solution. He went and built a driveway and was not aware that that was a code violation until he got cited on this, which is how we got here today. One of the things that we have discussed and discussed briefly with staff right before this meeting started was he'd be willing to take out the existing driveway or the original driveway, the one that's on the plan to the left as you look up there, if he could connect the carport to the new driveway and bring a driveway across the front. That would be one solution that would allow him to still maintain the access to the rear yard with the new driveway, put the bollards around or move the gas meter as conditioned in the staff report, and then still have the use of the carport, but not to drive aprons onto Parkchester.
Okay.
You want to add anything?
Pues simplemente quería hacer eso porque me han robado adentro de los carros afuera y por eso hice ese driveway.
So he did the driveway, he wanted it expanded to the back, he has been getting broken into, so he just wanted more safety. Of course, he cannot access the existing driveway going towards the back, and he was not aware that he couldn't do it, so he just wants to have some kind of access to the back for safety reasons.
What separates the carport from the backyard, that little piece of house there? Is that like a utility room, or is it a kitchen?
Es donde está el generador de agua y la lavandería.
Laundry room, a generator, some kind of generator.
Has the neighbor weighed in on this at all? That has that driveway kind of right on top of them next to the house?
We did send out neighborhood notifications, and I did not receive any direct opposition. So I didn't have anybody say anything.
Yeah. No.
He hasn't received any complaints from neighbors.
Okay.
Mr. Bray, I have a question. As far as the connecting the carport, do we have a rendering, or have you guys decided on how that would be drawn up?
No, that literally came up at 1:45 this afternoon.
Okay. Thank you.
I've got a sketch on the back of this.
Sometimes sketches pass, Mr. Bray. Sometimes.
Would it go in front of that existing tree? Would that tree just be kind of sacrificial if they did the new drive?
Room to put it in between the tree and the house.
Is there enough space? I can't.
No, I take that back. I think it would have to go on the street side of that tree.
That's what I was thinking. Okay.
Yeah. I was thinking that was a little farther forward, but.
It just looks like a hot mess. You know?
Yeah, is there any reason it's kind of jagged like the?
Yeah, that was touched on in the staff report. You can see it's a little hard to pick out there. If you see the light pole just to the left of the driveway, right underneath that light pole is a 672 inlet, and so they moved over to avoid that inlet with the apron to the street. A little hard to pick out in that picture.
No, I see it. I feel like I just would have, if you were going to do this, it would have just been better to kind of curve it in and then straighten out. So.
I know this question was asked earlier. I didn't hear the answer. What has the neighbor said about the driveway?
He indicated he's not had any complaints from the neighbor about it.
Yeah, this is for staff. So let's say if they got rid of the other driveway, would it be fine? Would this still need a variance to go like that? Other than the fact that it's so close to the gas?
I believe that was one of the conditions. If we removed the original driveway, it would be up to code to having one driveway, one curb cut.
So what variances would we really need at that point? I guess.
You wouldn't need a variance at that point. It would just be a rejection. It would be our condition number 2. We would need to remove. We were just talking about. But if you rejected, as we indicated, he would have to remove the original driveway, and then it would be in compliance.
Gotcha. So really, a rejection or approval with staff conditions is the same result.
Yeah,
Other than- But we
we
don't
would-
get the bollards or something like
Correct.
that.
An approval, we would just remove condition 2, and you guys would approve both drives or a variation thereof. But I wouldn't want to do an approval with that because it would just be a rejection, so.
Right.
I got a follow-up question to that.
Go for it,
If we added this secondary drive and the original drive got demolished and they still extended that secondary drive to the carport, is that allowed? About right, if they got rid of the original drive.
That would be considered a front yard parking pad at that point, because it's not 40 feet. We'd have to look at the dimensions. That was just now brought up, but
Okay.
I don't believe that it would be compliant, and yeah, we weren't supportive of that option.
So that the revised version with the connecting the carport driveway segment, that would require a variance from us, correct?
Yes, I believe it would. I'm going to look at the dimensions if I see those.
Yeah, that's just too much freaking concrete. That's just crazy.
Yeah. It would need a variance. So you could approve it with that if you so chose.
Any other questions for the applicant?
No. Not right.
I think we're going to discuss. If we could get a motion to approve BOA 2023-124 as conditioned by staff.
So move.
Second. I think I read the wrong number on that. I'm sorry.
230111.
111. Sorry.
111.
Yeah. So still moved. And is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion?
So I'm still a little confused. If we reject this, does this new drive have to be demolished? Is that what we're saying? Or one of the drives?
One of the drives.
The drives has to be demolished. If we vote with it like it is, removing number 2, we at least make them move the gas and remove the driveway.
I think that gas is dangerous. That's
Council's
scary.
going to move it, but I'd
Okay,
rather
yeah.
say they have to move it.
Yeah,
I mean, he's got 7.5 feet is the width of that driveway.
That's tight.
But apparently, if that gas wasn't there, they could remove the other driveway and have it there by right. I definitely would not vote for connecting any more concrete to that. I mean, that's like a whole, it just gives you parking in the whole front yard.
I mean, I think his goal was to get access to the backyard, so he's got to remove the other one to maintain that.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. I mean,
And
it's
kind
a
of what he
security
can-
issue. The carport's not going to give you what he was attempting to get. So he might lose a little accessibility into the carport, but the idea was to be more secure in the backyard. So I do agree that.
So just to be clear, what conditions were you were saying we could remove?
Yeah, so this is a little complicated, but I think we can clear it up. So if you were to approve this straight out, then we would remove condition number 1 because that is what the variance is for, is to have 2 driveways. So approving it with that condition is essentially a rejection. Now, and I think you were going toward like, well, you'd like to try to get him to just move the gas and not have the option of the bollards. But if you approve it and you remove 1, well, then he doesn't need the variance, so we can't. If you kept 1, then he wouldn't need the variance, so we couldn't enforce the variance. So I think that if you were going in that direction to, essentially, if you were going to where you want to remove one of the drives and require that the gas be moved, I think we would just need to handle that through code enforcement and see if they're our proper permits pulled, which I don't know if a curb cut permit was pulled, and we could try to handle it in that way. But if, in the end, he doesn't need a variance with what you approved, then we can't enforce that, if that makes sense.
So it's more simple to just reject it, and then he would have to determine which driveway he wants to keep.
Correct. And then we could try to deal with the gas issue.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any discussion?
So we're just going to reject it, and then he can do his own.
If that's what I'm leaning towards.
Okay.
Okay.
That's how
I
you're
haven't
gonna
voted
vote.
yet, but that's what I'm.
Okay.
Mr. Ragsdale, will you do a roll call vote for us, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bruce?
No.
Ms. Bostic?
No.
Ms. Baker?
No.
Mr. Campbell?
No.
Mr. Claybrook?
No.
Vice Chair Savage Towns?
No, I find that the standards of the UDC of 9.22.6 are not being met and will be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
And Chair Rankin?
No.
Motion fails.
My motion fails. Thank y'all. Mr. Ragsdale, will you call our next case?
Item number 4, BOA 2023-02124, 191 South Highland Street.
All right, I see the applicant, I see the opposition. Let's see.
All right, thanks.
All right, Ms. Longstreet, if you want to, we heard this last month, if you want to just kind of bring us up to speed on if there's any changes, then we can go and talk to everybody.
Okay, now, what I'll do is there were sketches of kind of a rendering of the proposed sign from last meeting by staff, and as well as a new updated proposal by the applicant, Josh Whitehead. And so I'll just bring up those photos so that you all can see them.
Oh, perfect.
I'm also going to hand this to Brett Ragsdale to pass out. These were submitted by Cecil. They're just the current photos. Okay. So here is the new proposal from the applicant. And it shows a kind of a brick foundation to quote unquote necessarily remove the pole sign to house I'm going to say the top of the previous pole sign, instead of just having the traditional metal banner and pole here. And so this is the applicant's proposal, and then here is, give me one second, and there are, okay, we're just gonna go with this one. This is the proposal by staff, and so these were the dimensions, the 8x24, for the monument sign that would potentially house either just the butcher sign or the Methodist butcher and any other future tenant business owners or tenants in that area who would benefit from utilizing the sign. I do know that there was a little discussion from Brett Ragsdale earlier regarding leaving the LPI for lease sign in place in addition to having both of them here, rather than moving the leasing sign and putting it into the monument sign. And Brett, I'm not sure if you want to speak a little more to the reasoning behind that.
Well, the conditions allowed that, but the original renderings that we had didn't show that, so that's why we did this rendering, just to show that that was an option with the conditions that we have. So this was just showing that was the option.
So as far as the lease sign, that's just allowed in the code, but is it supposed to be a temporary sign? Because that one looks landscaped.
Well, correct. I mean, these
Which
really
is
have
better, I
become
guess, but-
permanent signs, which, you know, if you have a space for lease, you can have a for lease sign. So it is, I believe, compliant. It's certainly not temporary, which is supposed to be the nature, but, you know, we're not looking to
Not worried
address
about it,
that.
yeah.
However, I will say that the original Board of Adjustment approval of signage for the, I guess it was the integrated center sign, said to remove, it was at another location and it required it to be removed, and it was just moved here, so but we're not going to, try to have them remove that. we're just looking to try to accommodate their request.
Sure.
And offered an option.
Very good. Okay.
And there were new conditions proposed
Okay.
that go kind of break down into, so the first condition being the proposed attached signage as shown within the report. So that is the signage that they put onto the building that was referenced in the previous presentation, that it is a part of this, it'll be included in the notice of disposition as approved, although it was not directly included with this variance as it was by right for the legal signage on the building. The second condition is that a detached monument sign shall be permitted within a maximum 8 feet sign area and 24 square feet, and that was the dimensions that was proposed by that rendering that you all saw. This may include, and it's also written in there, that it may include the multiple on-site businesses or any future or current lease information. The approval of the attached and detached signage shall not grant any variances to any other legal non-conforming signage on the site, which shall remain legally non-conforming. So the granting of this variance does not by right make any other legal non-conforming legal conforming. And the final site plan signage shall be submitted, as now there's been multiple revisions to the proposed site, to the proposed signed site plans. And then the standard, any change or deviation from the site plan submitted has to be submitted for approval by the board.
Thank you very much. Any questions of staff? All right, if the applicant will come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Josh Whitehead, Birch Porter Johnson, 130 North Court. I think Mr. Davis stole my thunder a little bit earlier because I had planned on briefly explaining the difference between non-conforming structures on one hand and non-conforming uses on the other, and what necessitates their expiration and removal. Non-conforming structures, the rule is generally because it costs so much to remove a non-conforming structure. Dillard Square, for instance, the building that we're located in at Highland and Poplar is a non-conforming structure. It is along Highland. The new current zoning regulations along Highland require buildings to be built up to the sidewalk with no parking intervening in that area between building and sidewalk. However, non-conforming buildings, do not lose their grandfathered status unless they are destroyed by more than 75% of their fair market value. In other words, if an earthquake or a strike of lightning happens or a fire that reduces that building to such a degree, you may as well build according to the new zoning ordinance, right? Non-conforming uses, on the other hand, as we discussed on items 1 and 2, the expiration comes after a period of vacancy, right? The property is vacant for so many days, 365 days usually, is when it loses its non-conforming status. The zoning ordinance treats non-conforming signs as non-conforming uses. They look like structures, Mr. Chairman, but the code treats them as uses. And that requires their removal after a certain period of time of cessation of use. We're requesting to utilize the old Subway sandwich sign for Buster's Butcher, but it has indeed been vacant for more than 3 months. And 3 months is the rule in the University District overlay for non-conforming signs. That presents a real challenge between the negotiations of leases between landlords and tenants, because it requires a structure to be removed, which is a pretty extraordinary situation for a structure to be removed prior to a new lease from being enacted on. Before I introduce our tenant, Buster's Butcher, Josh Hammond, the proprietor, I want to briefly introduce that tenant. As you may have seen in some pretty spectacular news and other media coverage, that Buster's Liquors and Wines has been treated pretty poorly by our community in the last few months and years. And if I was that business owner, if you were that business owner, we may think twice before doubling down. Mr. Hammond is doubling down, and part of that doubling down was within his lease to utilize the old Subway sign. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce Mr. Hammond. At the conclusion of his testimony, I think we're going to rest and reserve our balance of our time for rebuttal. Thank you.
Okay. If you'll give your name and address for the record, I'll swear you in.
Yes, Josh Hammond, 6240 Meadow Grove Cove, Memphis 38120.
Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so be God?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
For the record, I own the business with my brother and my mom, so it's a family business, and we've been in that area since 1970, to let you know. But I do appreciate the opportunity to come down and present our case. I'd like to reiterate, Mr. Whitehead's remarks in favor of this proposal with some additional context. When obtaining the lease of the former subway space for this new venture, we negotiated with the landlord to have exclusive rights to this sign. With that understanding, we feel this sign is extremely important to our business, and we're already behind on establishing any sign presence that we anticipated. We've been open now for 3 months. I still got customers that are coming in as I walk them down from our liquor shop to, they didn't know we were open. They think that sign up there unfinished has caused us not to open on time, but that's not the case. And so anyhow, I'd also like to say, I sit on the UNDC board, and while there'll be a fellow member and friend of mine, Cecil, who sits on that board as well, advocating against it to some regard, I respect his responsibility for being here and doing so. But also I'd like to point out that I've been involved with the UNDC near its inception. And I can remember this code provision was mainly to address all the numerous pole signs that were down there on Highland Street at the Highland Strip, where all the bars are, and in that environment. Whereas this sign sits alone on a little grassy area, off the sidewalk, off the parking lot, all by itself. So it's really unobtrusive. I'm not sure if you can see the proposal again, but it's the signage itself has been professionally designed. It's not just hokey little sign. It's been kind of brilliantly, created as far as we're concerned, and it does a real good match with the building. And you can see the column there that's being proposed as matching brick to the matching building. So it kind of looks more like, I guess you could say, a column sign or partly monumental at this point. But we feel that it's a really good look and will complement the center and the neighborhood nicely. I'd like to point out as well, we've encountered kind of another issue that we've just recognized being open in these few months. There is a bus stop right in front of this sign. And what's happening on windy or sunny or rainy days is that everybody at that bus stop that's a rider is coming up to hang out underneath our building and right in front of our butcher shop entrance. I've never really dealt with this because we're, the entrance to the liquor store is about 6 more windows down. So, at some point, I think we need to be looking at putting a bus shelter there. And, my concern would be if we put a bus shelter there and then we're forced to do the other alternative, that might impede the visual of that as well. It's something to consider. Look, we've invested a lot of money into our community over the years and with this new business. Ultimately, we feel this sign is not intrusive. It's not in a cluttered area. It'll present a very upscale and respectful look to our business and the neighborhood. Not to mention, most of all, this will be most cost effective and time sensitive. We'd really like to get this done and completed by the end of the year. And so ultimately, we feel this is a very reasonable and worthy request before you today. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Hammond? All right. Thank you for your time. We'll reserve your time. Looks like we have about 5 minutes for rebuttal total. Mr. Humphreys, do you give your name and address for the record for us?
Cecil Humphreys, 220 West Goodwin Street, Memphis. I'm here speaking on behalf of the UNDC.
Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Well, we talked about most of this last month. I'll address a couple things Josh indicated earlier. It's terrible with break-ins that Buster's have had in the last couple of years, but that's not really relevant to the issues at hand. And with respect to the 3-month requirement, I believe last month the applicant testified that the space had been actually vacant for more than 12 months. It's the 3 months that really matters, but it's not really quite as much of a hardship if it's 12 months. A bus shelter is not going to be built on that sidewalk. There's not enough room. There would be room south on the other side of this driveway if they ever wanted to put a bus shelter there. That makes sense for it to be there because there are no buildings in front of that. The main thing is that the pole sign that exists now, there's no justification for it being there. It's not allowed under current law. There are the conditions preceding to granting a variance are just simply not met. They're not even close to being met. There are no unusual characteristics or exceptional physical features with respect to this property. There are no exceptional practical difficulties or exceptional or undue hardship upon the owner of this property. There's a simple solution, and that's one that was proposed last time and is being proposed this time, is to replace the non-conforming pole sign with a conforming monument sign, which would add just as much advertising value to the business. I don't know if the pictures I gave you or...
Yes. He passed them around.
We've been passing.
I mean, you can see there's just a huge abundance of advertising for Buster's right now, not just on the large institutional sign, but 4 or 5 foot letters on the northern corner of the building, also on the eastern side of the building. There are Buster signs over the doorway. There are Buster's butcher signs, the red sign over the doorway, which is clearly visible from the street. The picture I took was from the sidewalk. There's the Buster's hanging sign to the side. There are no extraordinary circumstances to justify a variance in this point. And the applicant's proposal of just coating the pole with some white brick, I mean, you can dress it up and put lipstick on it, but it's still a pole sign. And another reason why the UNDC objects to leaving the pole sign there is the precedential value that it presents and the handicap that it would create for enforcing the overlay against other property owners. This is the only pole sign left between Poplar and Southern, except with one exception, for a store whose business has been continually operating. Four pole signs in that area have been removed. The owners have been forced to remove those. There are other applicants in the recent past that have tried to, they've invested a lot of money in the area and have requested pole signs and they've been denied. The McDonald's just south of Highland requested a pole sign and they ended up with a monument sign. The Family Dollar store just south of that, the same thing. They requested a pole sign and were denied. So I don't know how you explain to the people who have already been forced to take their pole signs down because of these regulations, or the people who've been denied the right to put a pole sign up. How do you explain to them that we enforce the law against you, but maybe not in this case, especially when there are no physical characteristics or other other exceptional properties of this property that would justify that. Between Southern and Highland, there are 11 or 12 pole signs existing now whose time, when their time comes, we need to be able to get rid of those. And how do we, I think that handicaps the city and handicaps the UNDC in supporting the removal when you don't enforce the law uniformly. So the UNDC would submit that either the pole sign, one way or another, needs to be put down. We would be supportive of the monument sign provided in the conditions of the staff, provided that those conditions as written now are adopted. So anyway, there's no, and sorry to bore you all, but there's no legal basis for granting a variance in this case. The brick sheathing on this doesn't make it a monument sign. It's just a weird looking pole sign, and they have other options. They're easily obtainable to get the same value and the same benefit to the business, and maintaining the viability of the overlay and our ability to enforce it against others in the future. So, are there any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Humphreys? None. Thank you so much.
Just as a quick rebuttal to some of those remarks were, this sign was supposed to be our main sign when we negotiated the lease. So when we ran into that not being accepted, we had to get something up on the building. So that's the reason we did the other two signs, if that is an issue of too much signage. But the other thing is those signs on the building are behind the columns. When you're coming down the street, you might be able to see that little blade sign. You don't really see the sign above the door unless you're kind of passing directly by it and looking over at 90 degrees practically, with the trees on this side of the street. And of course, you're just coming down the other side. It's just something to think about as you look at this.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I'd like to touch upon the extraordinary nature of our property that we feel warrants this request. The University District Overlay was established many decades after our site was built. Our building is roughly 70 feet behind the sidewalk, or roughly 70 feet behind where the ordinance says it ought to be. We feel that disparation, that disparate distance between the sidewalk and the building is our extraordinary situation. Yes, we do have wall signs, attached signage on the building, but because of the beautiful, admittedly, colonnaded nature of the structure, from many angles, that wall signage is blocked from the sidewalk and the street. We respect the fact that while one could, in theory, argue that no variance is ever precedential to the next, we understand that we're all human, including the board members. And so while maybe legally there is no precedence from one case to the next, in reality, we realize that there is some precedential nature to every act that this body takes. And we feel like we would like to address that. We respect the fact that there are many pole signs up and down Highland, and we feel like the way we have conditioned, and I believe Mr. Ragsdale has disseminated our proposed conditions, I believe the way that we have conditioned our signage, and if you follow with me on page 1 of this letter, item number 2, or condition number 2, we are proposing to be replaced with language that requires us to have a 4-foot wide brick base. Keep number 3. Number 4, we are imposing upon ourselves landscaping at the base of the sign. And number 5, to remove the metal frame sign that's just out of view of this image. We believe that if this is the precedence, this is not a terrible precedence, number one. Number two, when it comes to brand new signs, such as McDonald's and Family Dollar that Mr. Humphreys mentioned, it is much easier to build a monument sign from scratch. It is much more difficult to tear down an existing sign and rebuild it as a monument sign. Our estimates come in at about $20,000 to rebuild the sign as contained in pages 13 and 14 of your staff report. The UDC does say that financial considerations shall not be the only consideration when granting a variance, but it certainly does not preclude this board from considering the financial liability that, again, a tenant utilizing a sign that was not destroyed or damaged by 75% of its value or more in his or for his new business. Our proposal, as you see before you, will cost about $5,000. One more difference between our proposal and the staff's proposal that you find on pages 13 and 14 of the staff report is that we do not have underground electric to this site. To bring electric to this site, what we would probably do through MLGW is have an access straight from the utility line and erect a pole. The pole would likely be as tall as the current pole that's out there. So from an aesthetic standpoint, we don't feel like there would be any advantage. Finally, Mr. Chairman, if you're like me and would like to have as many distinctions between this pole sign and others down Highland, I draw your attention to page 3 of my letter. This pole sign was identified in a 2002 site plan that was approved by this body. Ms. Baker sat in Mr. Ragsdale's shoes. I sat in Mr. Ragsdale's shoes. The three of us would probably identify that subway sign differently. I'm thinking maybe I would be alone in the between the three of us. But I think this does provide one more distinction, that if that Pizza Hut, the former Pizza Hut down Highland, do they have an approved site plan? They probably don't. So that might be one more thing for you to hang your hat on, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. With that, I hear my alarm going off.
Okay. Are there any questions of the applicant?
I'm sorry. What's the current width of the sign now, the one proposed?
The current sign, which is the one you see before you, that is 12 feet wide by about 3 feet in height.
12 feet, okay.
So roughly 36 feet square.
My question is, if I understood everything that's been said for the sign, that what I get is, because of the trees and everything, you need it up that high to be able to see it. Is that the main reason why you want to stay with this?
Well,
or is there another reason?
That's one of the reasons. Mr. Hammond mentioned that there could be a future bus stop that is, in line with the staff proposed sign. But quite frankly, cost is another one. And the aesthetic nature of a future ground sign that would have electrical, that would have a pole with a meter on it serving that electricity. So then the question would be, well, you'd still have a pole.
Why would there, I might have missed it, why would there be one for the new monument sign, but there wouldn't be one for this one?
This was not included in our aesthetic, but our current sign is electricity is provided straight from the street, and there's a meter on it.
Are you saying there's a wire from that pole in the street?
I believe so, but Mr. Hammond, who's more familiar, he believes it comes from the ground. Okay.
Okay, so my question then would be, why couldn't you just use that same thing for the monument?
Yeah. Well, I guess in that case, we would not be erecting a pole.
At some point, as your width gets bigger for a pole sign, like with brick or cladding. At some point, does it stop being a pole sign and become a monument sign just by the sheer width of the base? Because most pole signs are what they are. They're just a pole or a small column. If your base was to get wider.
Now, I believe that what I'm about to say matches what Mr. Ragsdale would say, but of course he's the authority. I think a monument sign has to have a base as wide, if not 90+% wide, as the sign itself.
Okay. And there'll just be too much brick, obviously.
And a wide cover on a pole sign is required, right?
A pole jacket is required, but the width on a pole sign is not, like they are showing, this is probably a 2 foot wide, I don't know, but what they're recommending is the new condition that they presented is a 4 foot, but there's no required width, but there is a requirement for a pole jacket, which is what originally they were going to do.
That's what I'm talking about. What is the width required for the pole jacket? Do you know?
I don't recall.
Okay, no, it's not a big deal. I was just wondering.
18 inches?
Yeah. Okay.
I have a quick question of staff. So, this sign wasn't meant, you saw one picture there where there was nothing in it. So that happened at some point after Subway moved out. If the landlord had just put a lease banner on it, would have been in use? Or if it had said, let's say it's Subway had moved out 3 years ago and never moved their sign, would that have stopped? This is just for future reference. Would that have stopped the use of the sign?
They may be able to put the plaza name on it or something like that, but not a temporary, a lease sign is temporary in nature, so that I would not say would qualify.
Gotcha, okay. Any other questions of the applicant? All right, thank you very much. I assume you would like to discuss, if we get a motion to approve BOA 2023-124 as conditioned by staff?
So moved.
Second. Any thoughts?
I guess I just, really don't see this. I know definition-wise, this is claiming to be a pole sign, but the way this is designed, I don't see it as much. I mean, it's kind of borderline monument, if you will, versus the original pole. My other concern is at that corner. I frequent there a lot. And so to have a monument sign with that wide base, and I'm trying to pull out of that driveway that's in front of that leasing sign, to me would have more difficulty with that sign versus the other proposed sign, because it does give me some viewing if I'm trying to turn out of that parking as opposed to the monument sign.
Madeline, I agree with you. That was my concern about this proposed monument sign, is the visibility. I've turned out of there before. It's a very busy intersection. So I do kind of see the need for an elevated sign to somewhat advertise towards that intersection of Highland and Poplar. I think I heard the opposition talk about McDonald's, which I was definitely involved in, and then Family Dollar. To me, those are standalone buildings whose buildings act as a sign of their own, instead of a multi-tenant building where the butcher shop is kind of tucked in that corner. When Subway was there, it was very hard to see. There's some crepe myrtles or something there that are grown pretty heavily when during that season that I think cover up some of that signage. Not to mention the columns as well.
Mm-hmm.
Other thoughts? Let me ask you this. Based on y'all's two comments, y'all would like to possibly replace the conditions with the amended conditions?
I would, yes.
Okay.
I don't know. I can't speak for them.
Is there, Mary?
Can we take a vote on that?
I was going to see if there's
yeah.
any, if there's,
Okay. Yeah. I think I'd rather take a vote on it, if it's okay with you.
how would we procedurally do that? Do we just take a vote? Can we just vote to do that?
These
To substitute it? Do I need a motion to substitute the conditions? So if somebody gives a motion to substitute the conditions provided by Mr. Whitehead with the conditions provided by staff.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. And we'll just do a voice, let's do a raise your hand vote, just so we can count them easier. Or a voice vote.
Just the amended conditions of security.
Yeah, who's in favor of amending the conditions? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Who's not in favor of amending the conditions? Okay, 1. Okay. All right, so we would then amend the conditions. And then, is there any other discussion before we vote on the original amended motion? All right, if you'll give us a roll call vote, please, Mr. Ragsdale.
Ms. Baker?
No. I think it's a no. Yes.
Where's the?
It's a no.
No, yes. I got you. Ms. Bostic?
Yes.
Mr. Claybrook? Yes. Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Bruce?
Yes.
Vice Chair Savage Towns?
Yes, I find that the standards of the 9.2, 2.6 of the UDC are being met and will not be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
Chair Ring?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, approved as conditioned. Mr. Rags, will you call our next case?
Item number 5, BOA 2023-0125, 2339 North Reed Hook Road.
Okay. I see that we have applicant. I know we have some opposition.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, the Aguilaras would like to withdraw the application.
Okay. All right, so just to explain what happened, the applicant has withdrawn their application. So by withdrawing, they're able to bring it back if they want to, but I mean, y'all all get notice, the whole thing would start over again if they choose to do so, but there's nothing for us to vote on today.
I guess there isn't.
No, since they're withdrawn, it's like it's never happened. So, thank y'all for coming down.
Which one is this, 5?
That was Reed Hooker. What? The Reed Hooker case? Yeah. I know, I might need to go change clothes or something. All right, Mr. Ragsdale, I guess we're going to call our next case, I guess number 6.
Item number 6, BOA 2023-0131, 101 North Alicia Drive.
That was, real quick, that was supposed to be Mr. Davis's swan song. And he's just walking off. Thank you so much for everything you've done.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. All right. Let me back up. Get my stuff pulled up correctly. All right, Ms. Cobbs, if you could give us a staff report, please.
Thank you, Kendra Cobbs, Division of Planning and Development. So this is a variance request at 101 North Alicia Drive, and the representative is Mr. Josh Whitehead. This is located in Midtown. It is at the southwest corner of North Alicia, or Poplar Avenue and North Alicia Drive. Looking at the zoning map, it is zone commercial mixed use 3. And to the south and the west, you have residential single-family 6 zoning. Also, the land use map shows the property as commercial, and the residential single-family 6 is the single-family homes that are to the south and the west, and then commercial that is to the north and the east of the property. So looking at the photos, the request is actually a variance to allow the pole sign that is shown right here at the corner of Alicia and Poplar. The applicant, or also the tenant, would like to replace the sign copy and use this existing pole sign for Captain JJ Fish and Chicken. And also part of the request, and the reason why it would need to be a variance request is because the sign is taller than 10 feet and it is less than 10 feet from the right-of-way. Also to the right, the image to the right, there is a billboard on the property that is to the rear. So there is a part of the request would allow this billboard to remain, as well as the billboard that is along the property line seen in the left photo. And here's another image looking from North Alicia Drive of the pole sign. And this is an overall site view, the image to the right that shows all the signs in question.
So there's two billboards, one on each, like the east and the south boundaries, or west and south boundaries?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
And so these are just additional photos of the pole sign. And this is a close-up photo on site of the detached sign that is taller than the 10 feet and less than 10 feet from the right-of-way. So looking at the site plan, this is a 3-tenant site with 2 buildings. The building right here that faces Poplar, this is actually the Captain JJ occupant building. And then the building that is to the rear here is a 2-tenant building with a laundromat and a nail salon. And this is Poplar, and this is North Alicia Drive, just to orient you. And looking at the, this actually should say the survey. So this is a survey that was done that shows on the lot the pole sign at that time, which is still existing, and then the 2 buildings. And this is where the billboard is to the south, and then the other billboard to the west, along the property line. So to conclude, the applicant is seeking relief from the Unified Development Code. This would be sub-item 4973B2, also paragraph 498A4, and subsection 4915B. It would, the request would be to allow the detached sign or the pole sign, which is greater than 10 feet and also less than 10 feet from the right-of-way, and to allow this illegal sign to remain without conforming to the requirements of the code, and also to allow the 2 additional billboards that would be accessory uses on the site. The detached sign is at the corner of Poplar Avenue and North Alicia Drive, and it is for advertising Captain JJ Fish and Chicken. Also, the reason why we're here, I believe, is because zoning enforcement actually issued a citation for removal of the pole sign, and that citation is in your staff report on page 14. That citation was issued in July of this year. So because the damaged pole sign, there was not a permit that was submitted to replace the pole sign within the 60-day time frame that's required by the code. That's the reason for requesting the variance in order to allow it to remain. Also, in addition to the pole sign, as I've already stated, there are the 2 billboards on site. So staff is recommending rejection of the request. However, if the board would like to approve the request, these are the conditions that we would like to implement. And that completes the staff report. Happy to answer any questions.
I have a question. You keep saying replace the pole sign. I'm looking at the picture here, and that pole sign is still there. So does the 60-day window refer to putting new copy in there?
It's replace the sign copy. So the sign, the actual pole sign would remain, but to use the existing pole sign and replace within the sign copy area for Captain JJ.
Okay, I wanted to make sure about that.
Ms. Cobbs, do you know the date that the damage, like the accident happened, and the date of the application of the, for the sign permit? We know it's more than 60, but do we know, is it 100, is it 61 or is it 180?
Yes, I am not sure of that. I know that, the citation was issued outside of, that time frame, but maybe Mr. Whitehead will be able to answer that.
Great. Any other questions of staff or Ms. Cobbs? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Josh Whitehead, Burst Porter Johnson, 130 North Court. Wow. There was a lot of variances listed in the caption, none of which I believe we requested. So let me first get this out here. We are requesting no action be taken on the billboards. If they are legal nonconforming, if they're illegal, we want to just keep them in whatever status they are today. The way, and again, to go back to the difference between non-conforming uses and non-conforming structures, we treat signs, not as uses, not as non-conforming structures, but as non-conforming uses. So it's a period of vacancy. Well, wait. If it's all about a period of vacancy and we haven't gotten through 365 days, why am I standing here before you? Well, the sign code actually melds the worst parts of being a non-conforming use and the worst parts of being a non-conforming structure for our signs. So if a sign is damaged to any degree, not just 75%, but it could be 10% or 5% of its value, and that damage needs to be rectified with the issuance of a permit, you have 60 days to get that permit in hand. Our sign was damaged by an errant vehicle at Poplar and Alicia, which is not atypical. We waited until the insurance company of that motorist paid us before we did anything. Now, this was the tenant. The tenant then hired a sign company. It took about 30 days to get the insurance money, which is actually pretty remarkable. But it took 30 more days to get on the sign contractor's docket. By that time, the 60 days had passed, probably a few more days passed, and it was notified by codes that we were vacant, and we had gone past the 60-day rule. But this is not, I am not pleading relief from you because the ordinance is onerous. If I wanted to do that, I am in front of the wrong body, right? That is a policy decision made by the city council and the county commission who would go through some sort of sign code amendment process. But what I am here before you is saying the application of this rule, onerous or not, does present upon a real practical difficulty for us, given the fact that we had to wait for insurance money. Now, what about the precedential value? I think Mr. Ragsdale did just pass out. We are respectful that we are here before you. We have let the 60 days go by. 365 days has not gone by the way. And these conditions, again, they are written in such a way that they match the conditions that are found in the staff report. If you see condition number 2, we feel like can be struck through because our pole is 18 inches. So it already meets the requirements of a pole sign. And number 5, we're imposing upon ourselves, and this was not unanimous, Mr. Chairman, with my tenants, but we are imposing upon ourselves a landscape island at the base of that sign, 5 feet by 5 feet. To provide irrigation to that sign would be very cost prohibitive. So we're gonna plant, maybe for cost-effective purposes, but also for environmental reasons, drought-resistant plantings in that area. And Loeb my client here, has done this in other areas. You've probably seen the shopping center across the street from East High School has some landscaped islands. The shopping center at Madison and Belvedere has the same. So this is something that we have done in recognition of some of the compliant at the time signs, but are no longer compliant. I would challenge the use of the word illegal because these signs were legal when they were erected. It's just a question of whether they've lost their protected non-conforming status. And to that point, the sign code, the old sign code was very liberal, as we know, and we are respectful of the fact that the somewhat restrictive current sign ordinance, the purpose is to eliminate some of the aesthetic clutter. We just feel in this circumstance where we tried to go as fast as possible through the process and we just weren't able to get that permit within the 60 days does represent an extraordinary situation, number one. But more importantly, Number two, we have conditioned ourselves in such a way that to whatever degree there is some presidential value, we believe this landscaped island can provide some direction for future cases. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm available for any questions.
Any questions?
I have some questions. So, Mr. Whitehead, you are not requesting a variance to having to do with the billboards at all?
No, and I think both staff's proposed conditions and our proposed conditions are silent on that issue. Now, if we want to go a step further and say, this variance shall in no way affect the status of the two billboards, we're welcome to that condition.
I see on your condition list here, you have struck out condition number 2. Why did you do that? You don't want to provide that, or?
Our pole is 18 inches wide.
Already wider?
Yes.
Than that? Okay. And this might go to the staff. If this sign was being put in new, what would be the required landscape area at the base?
I'll have to defer to Mr. Ragsdale with the copy of the Unified Development Code.
I mean, we can wait on the answer to that, and maybe some other board members have some questions in the interim.
I have one quick question.
Go ahead, Aaron.
So if work was done on this sign within the 60 days, would we be, what would the issue have been if their work had commenced?
Had we, well, first let me say, I don't think the tenant or the landlord knew necessarily that to replace the plastic facing of the sign required a permit. And that was really the extent of the damage. And that may be why we got our insurance money so fast, because the damage was pretty minimal. But we did not know we needed a permit for that face. We now know. But had we gotten that permit, not just replaced the facing, but gotten the permit and replaced the facing within 60 days, we would not require a variance.
Yes.
Let me ask you a question about this. I know you struck 2, and Ms. Baker's asked you about that. Since this goes with the property, couldn't we keep number 2? You've already overdone number 2. So let's say there's someone in the future that wants to replace, y'all clearly have a jacket over it and they replace it smaller. Would I not need that in there to protect me from future malfeasance?
Well, you're correct. Number 1 speaks to a site plan, but not necessarily to a rendering, right? If we tied the approval in condition number 1 to both the site plan and a rendering, we could eliminate
Correct.
number 2, but I guess without a reference to a rendering of the sign, we could keep number 1. Yeah.
Keep number 2.
Sorry.
Okay.
And number 1, yes.
And that wouldn't require them to make any changes?
They've already overdone number 2.
Okay.
They've surpassed the requirement.
Okay.
I just worry about the next people that coming in and not having a requirement, and get rid of it or something. Other questions? Did we find anything?
I've got
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess this is really probably a question for staff. Is that appropriate to ask now?
Yes.
I'm looking for their proposed change to condition number 5. I'm wondering if the staff is okay with that. And instead of requiring an underground sprinkler system, they're proposing that they use drought-resistant planting. Does the staff have any objection to that? I guess.
Yes, staff.
Why?
We're just now looking at this.
Okay.
I don't have that copy, so.
I'm trying to read this, Mr. Whitehead, and it says that the landscaped area shall be minimum 5 feet and planted with drought-resistant plantings. Oh, and is not required to be irrigated with an underground sprinkler system. Yes, we would prefer that it stay the way we have conditioned it.
Okay, and why, what's the thinking behind that?
Well, the drought region, that's the requirement in the UDC, that you have a landscape island, if it were a new sign, with underground, with irrigation system, so.
Okay.
Did we decide what the area would?
We're trying to look at that now.
What was your question?
So
Where it could go?
There's a certain formula that determines how big the landscape area has to be. And that's what they're trying to look at now.
Go ahead, Mr. Bruce.
Yeah, I was going to ask the applicant if, if they would be okay with keeping the underground sprinkler system. I know you'd prefer not to do that, but is that a serious issue to you?
Well, I asked, we have a contractor on staff at LPI, and I asked him how much would it cost, and he said it'd be about $7,000. And again, we're weighing that cost with just the set of circumstances that brought us here. And then again, it's all about that 60-day window. And so we feel that's, already it's going to be expensive to create a little island, but an extra $7,000 to trench a water line, we think would be really over the top.
Okay, any other questions?
So just to answer the question about the landscape area, it was brought to my attention that it's required to be twice the size of the sign area. So this landscape area at the base would have to be twice the size of the sign area. And I'm not sure what the sign area is. I don't have specs on the sign.
And by that, the copy part at the top, the square at the top, okay.
Yes.
Mr. Whitehead, do you know what the sign face area will be?
It appears to be around 6 feet by 6 feet. I mean, just judging, the rendering on page 9 has either a real person or maybe a profile of a person standing next to it. He or she is probably about 6 feet tall. So we could do a 36-foot landscape area.
That would be 6 by 6. What if we just said that the requirements for the size in the ordinance would apply?
That would be
okay.
Probably better.
Any other questions? All right, with that, we're going to move to the opposition. I have two ladies that have come to speak to us today. Do y'all have an order you want to come? Do you want me to call a name randomly? Okay, Debbie, why don't you come up? Ms. Arrowwood. And give your name and address, and I'll swear you in.
Okay, my name is Debbie Arrowwood, 10 North Ashlawn Road.
And then do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so be God?
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Arrowwood.
We're asking for any and all variances to be denied. The property at 101 Alicia butts up to 2 residential neighborhoods, Morningside Drive to the west and Green Meadows Poplar Glen to the south, and all of the rest of Alicia Drive is residential and part of Green Meadows Poplar Glen. We're concerned that a variance would set a precedent that would also include in the future the 2 existing billboards that are there that are also not in compliance to either remain or be replaced if they were damaged. They both violate the order, the current order to be located within 50, cannot be located within 50 feet of a residential district, and they both are. Also, there's safety concerns about distracted drivers that come through there. Alicia Drive makes a real hard left curve just a few feet from the property at 101. And there have been numerous cases of people being distracted and not making that curve, even though there's 2 arrows, cautionary arrows, to direct them that the road goes this way. they continue to miss it. We don't know exactly what they're looking at, but they're not looking at the road. They have plowed into yards, fences, and homes. There has been at least one death that I know of. Most recently, they took down a concrete light post and both of the cautionary arrow signs. So they're a little distracted when they come through there to start with. So we would like to lessen the distractions on that corner. And we respectfully ask that you deny any variances.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Arrowwood? All right, seeing none. And Ms. Cranford, if you can give your name and address for the record for us, please.
Yes, Pamela Cranford at 85 North Alicia.
Okay, and do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Cranford.
I'd like to speak to the fact that that is a very complicated intersection. Lots of stuff going on there. And it's literally dead man's curve right ahead in front of it. There's been deaths in that curve and accidents because people don't realize how close they are to a complete left turn in that curve. And I've lived there over 30 years, and I've seen lots of accidents, even with cars that have been coming up into my yard because of that curve there. And I would like to request that would never be able to be a live operating sign ever again because there's just too much distraction at that intersection going south on Alicia from North Hollywood.
Okay. Are there any questions for Ms. Cranford? All right, thank you much, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make sure that both of you neighbors heard and realized that the billboard part of this is gone. They're not even requesting that. So I just want to make sure you know that.
We didn't know that until we came today.
Okay.
But in his conversation, it sounded like he wants the possibility of ever making it into a sign again in the future. Which
the billboards?
Well, you're talking about
the sign that's up close to the street.
Yes.
It's been damaged.
So yeah, here's kind of where we are. The billboards are legal non-conforming. So they're there until they're not there. The tenant probably has some agreement that's already in place, but they wouldn't be able to if those were destroyed, they couldn't be rebuilt. They are asking to fix the sign on the corner.
And make it an operating sign?
Yes, that is really why we're here, is that sign on the corner.
Well, that's what I thought it was about.
Sure,
That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
I think we should eliminate distractions at that intersection because it's very, very dangerous there. In 30 years, I have seen, I had lost count how many accidents that have been in that curve.
Yeah.
No one realizes how fast they're going to have to turn left when they're going towards it because all the lights are there on the corner and the curve up there is in darkness other than a street light. You just don't have any foresight. If you've never been down that street before, you don't realize what you're entering.
Yeah, it's a hard turn.
Yes, hard turn, really hard.
All right, any other questions for the opposition before we move back to the applicant? How much time do we have for the applicant?
7.
7 minutes of rebuttal if you need it, Mr. Whitehead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't need that. To the billboards, I think we've discussed that. We're amenable to a friendly amendment that would address those and that no variance is granted to those. On the distraction element, obviously, we're a commercial business, and I think advertising, on-premise advertising, is crucial to keep this as a viable commercial enterprise. And so if we were to adhere to the zoning ordinance, we would, as Ms. Cobbs mentioned, be allowed to have a 10-foot monument sign right up at the intersection. And we feel that this elevated sign is much less distracting to travelers. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I think I'm ready to rest.
Okay, let me ask you a couple questions. So I messed around with some of your conditions, so I'll try to read them properly. Like if we kept 5 like you had it, but then the landscape area, shall be a minimum of that required by the UDC based on the size of the sign and planted with drought resistant, blah, blah, blah.
Correct.
Okay. And then number 6, copies of the billboard agreements will be, I'm sorry, I don't write very clearly, will be basically given to the planning director, and in no event shall any billboard agreements be extended beyond the current term. And I don't know, they might have a 99-year lease. I have no idea on that. I just want to know that whenever that agreement's done, those billboards are coming down. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I mean, we may be back before you. That could, again, weighing what brought us here before you and the financial implications, that wasn't the condition 6 I had in mind, but we can certainly.
What was your condition 6?
The granting of this variance in no way affects the off-premise advertising signs.
I like that better because what I'd be afraid of would be, we don't know what the number's going to be, and, it almost like, I want to hear the case if something happens at that billboard, that they want to remove the building and then put something back. I want to hear the case about whether the billboard can stay or be put back. That's why I'd just rather have it.
I think we'd still have to hear the case. This is just asking so we know when those billboard things are.
Okay, I just want, the only concern I would have would be, and maybe shouldn't even be concerned about this, would be that because we put it in that condition that we were recognizing that they didn't have to take it down until that time.
Right.
That's the only concern I'd have.
Okay. We can go with the alternate condition.
Mr. Whitehead's.
Yeah, I mean, that nothing herein in any way affects the legal nonconformity.
I was going to suggest you could actually combine the two, and you could have both. This variance does not approve the on-premise signs, or the off-premise signs. And I'm sorry, I didn't hear all of your conditions, but that would.
Basically, the point of my condition was that where the planning director knew when those terms were up, and we could make sure that there wasn't an extension.
Now it does.
Those are big old billboards right on top of residential.
Yeah.
It's not even like it's Poplar above Steinmart or whatever it is now.
I'm with you, yeah. As long as it's not going to be somehow turned into.
Could you, Mr. Ragsdale, do you mind writing that down and then reading it back to us, maybe at a more appropriate time? Like during discussion? Not White, Mr. Ragsdale, I'm sorry. It was years. It was years of someone else in that chair.
I was going to say, we can have Mr. Whitehead write it, but I think
maybe we'll have Mr. Ragsdale proof it. If you could put those two together while we're talking. So, any other questions of the applicant? Okay, I assume y'all are ready to discuss. If we could get a motion to approve BOA 2023-131 as conditioned by staff to start
So
with.
moved.
Okay. Second. All right. Let's talk about these conditions. Well, first, I'd like to say, knowing what they can put by right at the corner, I find more distracting than that sign up in the air. And that's part of the reason why I think I'm going to vote to have the sign in the air. We don't have that. They could put a monument right on the corner that to me is even more distracting of traffic, people turning and stuff like that. So I just wanted the neighbors to know why I was doing that. And they could do that by right without a variance.
Right. I mean, we don't have the authority to tell them they can't have a sign.
Right. So let's look at the conditions. We'll keep number 2 like we discussed. I would see, let's talk drought resistant versus irrigated. I mean, I understand the applicant's point of view on sign got messed up. It's really not even that expensive for us to put the new plastic up there, but this is going to cost thousands of dollars based on that weight we had. So I think we're still coming out better than we were with drought resistant to try to cut that baby a little bit. Are there any? Agreed. So I think condition 5 would read, the landscape area shall be a minimum of that required by the UDC based on the size of the sign and planted with drought-resistant plantings and is not required to be irrigated with underground sprinkler system. And then Mr. Ragsdale, were you able to write anything down that made more sense to what we were talking about number 6 than what I was making up?
Excuse me, I believe so. And these could be 2 conditions, or we could just have a single, but the approval of this variance does not indicate approval of any other signage on the property. The applicant shall provide current lease information to the Division of Planning and Development, and the billboards shall be removed at the end of the current lease term. Is that?
That got what I was getting after, yes, sir. And so is there any opposition to those amendments to the staff's conditions? Seeing none, is there any other discussion? All right, Mr. Ragsdale, if you could give us a roll call, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Can I get who made the motion and second? Do we recall?
Y'all remember?
I seconded. I don't know who did it.
I think I.
Mr. Bruce.
Thank you. I apologize for that. Ms. Bostic?
Yes.
Mr. Bruce?
Yes.
Mr. Claybrook?
Yes.
Ms. Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Vice Chair Savage Towns?
Yes, I find that the standards of 9.22.6 of the UDC are being met and will not be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
And Chair Ray?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, ladies, also for coming down. Mr. Ragsdale, if you could call the last case.
Yes, it's item number 11. It's a petition to waive the BOA rules of procedure in Article 7.
Okay. And this is, okay. Gotcha. Okay. So do we have a staff presentation or is it just us, our discussion of it?
Which case was it?
Okay. Yeah, perfect. So this is the case we heard, I believe it was last month. So, Aaron?
I didn't know if it was last month or was it 2 months ago?
It was recently. We heard it recently on the Church on Autumn. And so the applicant has come back and asked us to waive our requirement that does not allow another case due on a property within 6 months. I will say, as we got started talking to Mr. Ragsdale with this, I thought we couldn't hear the same case, like the same presentation. But apparently the way our procedure reads is we can't hear a case on that property. Where like maybe LUCB is a little bit different than that. So that's something we might want to look at our procedures, depending on how we vote here and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, if somebody's bringing us a different plan, do we not want to allow that to be heard? So simple vote is just whether or not we want to have a hearing next month on the actual case. And then we could, and there is one card in opposition. I know the applicant's also here. We don't have to get any testimony whatsoever unless we want testimony. That's up to us to decide. We can just vote, okay, let's hear it next month.
I vote to waive it.
Hey, Tim.
Here next month.
I just, when I was reading this, going over it before we were getting prepared for this, I remember our kind of charging order to them, to the applicant was,
figure it out.
You got to figure something else out to do with this property.
Yeah.
We're not approving this. So they're kind of working on that.
Yeah.
That's just my thought.
It seemed like all the neighbors that were here all wanted something to be done with that property.
Right.
And probably whatever's being done with that property will require variance.
Right, and we're going to have to hear it anyway, yeah.
Unless a church moves in, which is probably unlikely there. So I think this is moving the ball where we would want it to move. Any other discussion?
I think they're going to bring a new ideal next month. So I say waive the time limit and let them present what they come up with.
Okay. I would like for us to maybe in the future look at our procedure to kind of hone in a little bit more, like it can't be the same case as opposed to the same property, but that's not for today. So,
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
I don't know who can answer it. What are art studios? 6 art studios? Is that apartments or a place
think
where
those-
people go to paint?
I think that's where people go to paint.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
those aren't living quarters, but we're not hearing the case.
All right,
So-
I know, I was just,
Right. In the floor plan, they didn't show any beds or anything. They showed some tables. So I don't think it wasn't apartments.
okay.
Yeah. As in studio art apartments.
Well, that's what yeah.
Any other comments before we vote? Okay. Do we need a voice vote? Is fine?
Well, we need a motion and a second.
Oh, is there a motion to approve agenda item? And my thing went off the case. Oh, thank you. Oh, there's no case. Agenda item number 11.
Yeah.
And so is there a motion for that?
So moved. Second, yeah, so moved.
Seconded? I think between these two. Yeah.
I think we got that.
You can pick who does what. And then can we do a voice vote on that?
Yes.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. We'll hear that case in the December's meeting. Are there any announcements?
No, Mr. Chair, but I do want to discuss with you one item.
Okay. Somebody that's come to speak. I don't know that we're the forum to talk about this as the Board of Adjustment, but I will give you Mr. Brittenham, I'll give you 2 minutes to state your case and we'll hear it and I can give some advice on it.
Okay.
Okay? And so if you'll start the timer on 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
My name is Dedrick Brittenham. My office address is 3385 Airways Boulevard, Suite 229. Mr. Chairman, I have a letter to hand out to the board, please.
Okay, go ahead.
Could you stop the time while I hand it out?
Yes.
I also have a copy of your rules.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
That's fine. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
All right, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes, sir. We're here to appeal a decision of the secretary. And if you turn to your rules that are being handed out now on page 2, highlighted section, any applicant aggrieved by a ruling of the secretary under paragraph 4 above may submit his or her application and attach data to the board at any regular meeting. That's what we're doing now, Your Honor, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
If the board finds that the ruling of the secretary is in error, the application shall be placed on the docket of the next regular meeting or a special meeting called for this purpose. And the reason we're here is that we filed, I represent Mr. Chris Montesi, who is a longtime developer in this community, and he filed a plan development application some months ago. A decision was made by the administrator that the application would not go forward. Then we filed an application to appeal that decision to the Board of Adjustment, and that application has not been processed to be heard by the Board of Adjustment. So pursuant to your rules that I just read into the record, Mr. Chairman, we are requesting that you find the decision not to forward the application to the Board of Adjustment as error by the Secretary, and then place that application for review, application for appeal on your December docket.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, that's, okay, understood.
Okay.
So, I get what you're saying, but he's appealing an LUCB decision to not, I guess he's trying to get a variance from that?
No, sir. No, sir. I can explain it clearly.
Okay, just real quick, yeah.
Mr. Montesi filed an application with Division of Planning and Development to process a plan development for approval at the Land Use Control Board and then County Commission. A decision was made by the staff not to process that application on the excuse that it was incomplete. So it never got out of the Division of Planning and Development. We appealed that decision not to process the PD application. We appealed that decision to the Board of Adjustment. And subsequently, that application was not processed and sent to the board. That's why I'm here.
Right.
Okay. So, and according to the rule, we can appear at any Board of Adjustment meeting, plead our case, and ask that it be placed on the docket for the next meeting. And that's what we're doing. It never went to Land Use Control Board or anywhere else.
But you're requesting a variance over the,
No,
I guess I'm confused on if something was, like, whether it was incomplete or not. I get, like, there's a situation where you think something's complete, they think it's incomplete, but I just don't know why we would be I mean, I get what you showed us here. I just don't understand how it got to Board of Adjustment.
We filed an application to the Division of Planning and Development for a plan development to be processed by DPD. DPD told us they were not going to process the application. So that was a decision by the Division of Planning and Development not to process the application for a plan development. The Unified Development Code provides a process that when a party is aggrieved by a decision of the administrator or Division of Planning and Development, that appeal can be taken to the Board of Adjustment. And I have provisions of the UDC that say that.
Let me ask you,
yes, sir.
What you're telling me is basically we're the court of recourse for you for any decision by the director.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You're the check and balance.
I don't know if that's right, but I understand what you're saying.
I have the UDC provision. If you want.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm not disputing it at all. Yeah. But I understand your logic.
There has to be a release valve somewhere when staff makes a decision that the applicant disagrees with. The applicant needs to go somewhere.
I agree. I don't know if it's
that decision.
I wouldn't know if it's here, and I just don't know, or if it's like, hey, we got to sue somebody. You know. What did they say was missing on your?
The rationale was that we did not submit a letter to allow a sewer tap. This is a property that's in the county. Mm-hmm. And without any posting as to this, what I'm about to tell you, the staff said you have to submit a letter from the city administration to allow a sewer tap to the existing sewer that runs immediately in front of the property. Mm-hmm. So now, and they said since we didn't have that sewer tap letter, the application was incomplete. We said process it anyway, which there's a provision for that, and staff said it's incomplete and we're not going to process it. So what we're saying is that plan development application should be processed anyway And then you can merely add a condition to the application saying, if approved, you must have permission from the city to tap into the sewer. Instead, they want the sewer tap letter first before they'll even process the application. And we think that's wrong. And they said, we're not gonna process it. We said, we understand. So then what I just passed out to you at 9.23.1, it says an appeal at B, an appeal of any administrative decision shall be taken by filing written notice. But then at A, it says an appeal by any person agree to a final order, interpretation, or decision of the zoning administrator in regards to provision of this development may be taken to the Board of Adjustment. The Board of Adjustment is a release valve when the applicant disagrees with the staff. There has to be somewhere the applicant can go when there's a disagreement. And, yes, ma'am.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
You can cut me off anytime.
Why is it that you don't have the letter? I mean, to me, it seems like the easy thing for you to do would be to just go get the letter. That way, you can go forward.
That's a good observation. And we attempted to get a letter.
Thank you.
We attempted to get a letter, and we didn't get a letter. We were denied. However,
You couldn't get the letter, is that what you're saying?
yes, that's correct.
But isn't there an appeal process there that might be more appropriate? Because, isn't that a public works engineering type thing? And surely there's a relief valve there. There's not?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Well, I take that back. The section of the UDC dealing with engineering takes you back to the Board of Adjustment. When there's a decision by engineering that the applicant disagrees with, they come to the Board of Adjustment. The Board of Adjustment has tremendous power and authority, as all of you know, since you've been sitting up there for a while. And the Board of Adjustment power and authority comes from a statute, a state statute. It's independent of any local ordinances. Now, the UDC adopted these statutes. However, the Board of Adjustment still maintains that power and authority that came from the state legislature. And in their wisdom, back in the early 20s, 1920s and 30s, a determination was made that communities need a Board of Adjustment as a release valve. That's what y'all do anyway. We've heard here this afternoon, when an applicant has a particular situation that the UDC does not allow, and the staff says we can't do it, or the building official says we can't do it, the release valve is the Board of Adjustment. And it's the same way with any appeal of a decision that staff makes.
Okay, let me restate something. So what you're asking today is basically, I want y'all to agree to hear my case next month.
That's correct.
Correct?
That's correct.
Because I don't know what's right, what's wrong.
Yes.
We don't have that. You've given us some information, I appreciate it.
Yes.
But we don't have the other side prepared to do that.
Yes, sir.
So what we're really deciding, do we want to hear this next month?
And the case that we would hear next month is whether there was an error in the decision that
An
was
appeal
made.
of the zoning director's decision.
So if we decide that there was, then we wouldn't decide the case. We just send it back to whoever was land use control board or whoever it was, right? We're just deciding if an error was made. Is that right?
It's never been before the land use control. It's never been that way.
Who would it go before?
Okay, hold on a second. If you decide that yes, we're correct, the applicant is correct, and staff should process the application, then yes, then it goes to the land use control board for a
Okay,
hearing.
and then we process it. Let's say we do that, and they send it, and then they say, well, you don't have your dead gum sewer letter, you're stuck.
We deal with the land use control board.
But you can't have you've already been denied a sewer letter. I don't understand why we're here.
Sorry?
Why are we, if you can't get a sewer letter, which you were denied,
how do you move forward?
Is this not like an exercise in futility? I get they'll go to land use, but won't they just deny it because of no sewer letter?
No, they may not deny it because we don't have the sewer letter. We don't know what they might do, but the proper procedure and action is to let it go to the Land Use Control Board, and we make our case. And as I said earlier, you can put it, as Ms. Baker knows, you can put a condition in the plan development. Thou shall have a sewer tap letter before construction, and the case gets approved.
So it's never been before the Land Use Control Board,
Correct.
So we don't know what they're gonna rule.
That's correct.
Basically is what
We
you're
don't
saying.
know.
Yeah, you're asking us to review the staff's decision to reject it because the sewer letter's not there. That's all we're
correct.
doing. Okay.
Mr. Ragsdale, do you have any, you were trying to say something a minute ago.
Well, I don't know if Mr. Rowling would like to speak to this. We have been in contact with the applicant for many months on this, and this was, we said that this is not appealable to this board. Of course, Mr. Britnum, you're allowing him time to speak, which is essentially what we said was not appealable. So I think Mr. Rowling might want to speak, or you guys might want to decide how to.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
Mr.
nothing
Rowling,
to act on. There was no agenda item.
Sure.
And
do you have anything you can add to that, Mr. Rowling?
Well, I can tell you, Robert Rowling,
Robert Rowling, County Attorney's Office. I can tell you that this was all discussed and decided in August, and we are now in November. Mr. Britnum, who did not tell me he was going to be here today, stated that any administrative decision is appealable. What the UDC says is that any final decision is appealable. Because the zoning administrator determined that the application was incomplete, it was not a final decision. He could still get the sewer letter at that point.
Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Rowling, I know him real well, and Ms. Baker knows. The word final doesn't appear in 9.2.3.1. There's no final decision. It says any person aggrieved by final order, interpretation, or decision of the zoning administrator. I don't know what's more final than we're not going to process your
Well, it's bring the rest of the stuff that we say we need for an application. I'm still just like, I don't understand when you've already been denied the letter why we're talking about it. Like, how are you, like, are they going to change their mind?
That would be heard next month. But here's if that's the issue with the chair, we know for a fact that DPD processed an application without a zoning letter, and they conditioned it that you had to have a zoning letter prior to, you had to have a sewer tap letter prior to starting construction. And it went to the Land Use Control Board this month, right?
So I guess the question
was, that condition stayed in there, yet they didn't have a sewer tap letter, Mr. Chair.
That was an existing PD that was already approved, and it was a major mod to that PD. So this is a new PD.
I've got a question. So if, I know that the staff rejected the application as it is, if the applicant were to get a letter tomorrow and resubmit the application, could it be heard, or are they precluded from hearing?
Yes, it would be docketed at the next meeting and heard.
And may I address that point?
I think we're done. We're gonna discuss what we're gonna do and then decide what. So the question is, do we want to hear more about this next month, or do we want to let him just appeal to like the courts? Because I don't really know.
My question is, even if you condition the Land Use Control Board to have construction can't start until you get a sewer letter, what is going to change to get the sewer letter in order to, if that's already been denied, I don't see how do you keep moving forward without the sewer letter? So even though we're kind of going in a circle, even if you condition with that, you've already been disapproved to have that letter. So what's the next steps on that front?
May I respond?
Well, and that's for our board. I mean,
whole sewer issue.
We're in discussion.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I thought the
I appreciate it though.
addressed to me. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I don't know what would change, and I think that I just don't know what we can actually do that's going to make a difference. So I would vote that we're not going to hear it next month. And I'd hope that that's some sort of order that he has someone, if he has recourse to the courts, he can go to that. But that, it's getting into a little legal above our pay grade, I think, on these issues. And we have our counsel that says we shouldn't be here. We have our director that says we shouldn't be here. And it doesn't make sense to me even while we're here. There's no letter forthcoming. So is there anybody in favor of hearing this case next month?
No, I'm like Ms. Baker. I mean, the appealing process should, if they deny the letter, or the letter is the holdup, that's where his appealing process should start, in that.
And no decision has been made on a case. It's been made on the preparation for a case.
Correct.
I think that's the biggest difference.
All right, so I would invite somebody to make a motion to not allow.
Ms. Rowan, do we
can
need
even
to
make a
vote on this
motion.
since it's not an agenda item, or
Can we do that?
No, you don't need to vote on it. As Mr. Ragsdale said, it's not on the agenda. Mr. Bretton was simply speaking to the board.
Okay, all right. So no vote taken to hear it. Is there any other matters to take up today, Mr. Ragsdale?
Just